All right, thank you so much, Tiger, and appreciate everyone joining tonight, and also folks that are going to be listening to this after the fact, because obviously we promised to share this with everyone. As Tiger mentioned just before we dive in, I can be wordy, but I'm going to try and make this pretty succinct tonight, and then follow up with as many questions as I could possibly get in before the top of the hour. And so with that, absolutely feel free to jot your questions in around anything really related to performance. And as you go through it might stimulate questions. So I really encourage you to get involved. And Tiger will be moderating. This is an event like this is something that we do at Purple Patch periodically, really coming out of our mission. And our mission at Purple Patch is to empower and educate all human beings to reach their athletic potential. And it's through that lens of reaching athletic potential that you reach your human potential. And that's really appropriate for our discussion tonight. Now, I have put together a little presentation, so we will get going. And following the presentation, we're going to send you a little goodie packet, which I think that you guys will enjoy and hopefully find very beneficial. Continued education, a piece that we've put together that really brings to life a lot of the discussion tonight, and I hope that it helps. All right, so with that, I'm going to share my screen, and I am going to get going with this little very nice presentation that hopefully we can see. So let's talk about what we want to get done. We want to achieve three main things today, and I think that if our quest is to take our current performance level and take it to the proverbial next level, we've got to first align on what success is. That's really important, of course. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the grounding of what are we really trying to accomplish as we go through this. And once we have all held hands and said, fantastic, this is what we're looking to achieve, then I want to dig into some of the methodology. How are the practical steps that you can take to actually achieve that success as you go on? And then we try and get a little applied, where the real meat and potatoes is, as I like to say. How do we actually put it into action? Because I would like you to leave tonight's session being able to say, all right, I'm going to get forward and get an action plan. So that's the way that we're going to structure it as we go through tonight's session. And as a final reminder, before I tuck into my meat and potatoes, of course, ask questions in the chat as you go. All right, fasten your seatbelts, guys. Here we go. The first thing that we want to talk about is defining success. Sounds very positive, doesn't it? So in order to do that, we've got to talk about this guy. Who is this guy? This guy is what almost everyone listening tonight has, which is a big, hairy goal. Most of us come into any season, any year, and say, I want to accomplish this. And I think if we're going to get to defining success, we can't move forward without talking about goals. Because there's a real grounding about how to actually set a goal and what a successful goal looks like. And when I think about someone that is successful, I always think about goals in somewhat of the reverse of how many people do it. Oh, super, my friend David's going to do an Ironman, so I'm going to sign up. Now, how do I get about going to do that? I've always wanted to do Boston. I'll go and do Boston. Now let's get busy fitting it all into my life, whatever it might be. I always like athletes to think about it in the reverse. And we start with what's the most important thing in our life. We first think about what's actually the fabric of your life, your family, your friends, your constituents, and really making sure of where am I at this time. And in addition to that, they sort of go hand in hand. What are my work commitments like? And this is really important because that creates the overall framework of day-to-day life. And having a real understanding of that is important. I then like people to think and look ahead over the course of the year. Say, what's my travel schedule like? What are my vacations? Because that informs some of the timing, both in terms of not just when the event is, but your ability to prepare for an event. And I know it sounds very, very basic, but it's really important. And then you've got everything else that we might consider in life. You coach Johnny's baseball team. Maybe you're going on a series of business retreats, whatever it might be, but you have logistics. And what we've really just framed up there is the structure of most of our lives. And for many of us, time-starved. It's very, very busy. But in order for us to be successful by achieving your goals, we want to ensure that we put your goals in context of that life. So rather than trying to mold life around them, it's really important that if you are going to take your performance to the next level, the first thing you have to do is to choose and establish goals that are suitable for the year that you have. And it takes a little bit of planning, it takes a lot of communication with friends and family. But overall, if you can get the goal that fits into life for this year, you have a higher chance of success. So that's obviously a very basic, nice runway into tonight's discussion. But now, let's think about, great, let's imagine I'm going to train for a marathon, or I'm going to train for an Ironman. I want to qualify for a world championship, whatever the goal might be. And that's super. You can put it down. You have your A race. I'm going to do Ironman Arizona at the end of the year. And it all sounds very excited. And now, great, I've got to build my plan to get ready for it. Maybe you're going to choose to do a couple of events along the way. If you're an Ironman athlete, maybe you do a couple of 70.3 half Ironman events. If you're training for a marathon, maybe you're going to do a couple of 5 or 10Ks, but you pop a couple of events in. And that's super. And what you start to have now is the structure of a season plan, where you say, okay, now I can see the calendar and I can see where my training is going to be. And this very simple representation of a plan, at least around your events, that's where for a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes, it kind of starts and stops. But it's a mistake. Because the truth is, if we're starting tonight's session talking about success, your success is not going to come out of just chasing definitive results in events. Goals are great, goals are important, but that's not where the magic is. Where the magic really comes out when you take your performance to the next level is by you taking on a performance lifestyle and embracing the journey. And what I mean by that is that the finish line at the end of your A race, in our little example, Ironman Arizona, that finish line of that race does not represent the end of your performance journey. All that is a checkpoint. It's a lightning rod. It's something for us to build the program around. But the truth is, if you're going to be successful in any endeavor in life, and in our example tonight, of course, we're talking about sport and endurance sport specifically. If you're going to be successful, all of the magic, all of the lessons come out of embracing the journey as you go along. And the goals, your big hairy goals that are important because they deliver satisfaction, checkpoints of progression, a great source of conversation and pride, excitement, direction. They're really important, but all they are checkpoints. And so the first message is for you to embrace, if you want to genuinely raise your level of performance, you've got to embrace the performance journey. Well, that sounds great, but what drives the performance journey? Because it's counterintuitive for many people. And a lot of people think, well, hang on, I really train so that I can get ready for my Ironman Arizona or whatever the A race might be. But the thing that really drives success and drives your journey, the fuel behind everything, and the most successful athletes always have this, is purpose. What's your purpose? That's the thing that drives it. And if you think about the greatest athletes in the world across multiple sports, Roger Federer, Serena Williams, LeBron James, the list goes on. They all love it, and they might win Wimbledon championships. They might be world champions in the NBA, whatever it might be, but they keep coming back and loving it. And the reason is they love it, and they have a purpose, a drive behind it. Let's use an example that isn't in sport. Let's think about a diabetic, someone that's maybe grossly overweight and reliant on insulin. They might have a goal to lose 40 pounds. They might have a goal to get off daily insulin. But the purpose that's going to actually drive that goal, to make them be more successful, is the thing that is close to the heart, that is actually the thing to maintain or embrace and commit to the habits that are going to take them to that goal. And for someone it might be, look, I want to lose 20 or 30 or 40 pounds. I want to get off of insulin because I've got the purpose of being there for my kids and being active with them. And I want to be alive and thriving when they graduate high school. And that has real meaning. And so as you approach this year, I really encourage you not to just think in terms of little checkpoints of the end of the goal is your A race. Instead, take a bit of time to reflect, to say, what's my purpose? What am I really looking to achieve? Why am I doing it? And this whole sporting journey starts to take on a slightly different flavor and personality. Super. That's really empowering. That's the start of it. And with that in mind, I think it's important to ground ourselves. If you become a purple patch athlete, what actually defines success? What's the thing that is actually ultimately where we can sit back in our armchairs and say, well done, you were successful? Well, guess what? There's more than one thing. There's several things, and they all carry great weight. They're all important, and I'm going to list them for you right now. If you want to, you can take a screenshot, because this is a really good thing to remember. The first defining piece of success for us is that you improve and develop athletically. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to become a world champion. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to cross the finish line for the very first time. We are all united in a desire to improve. And that's really important, that success. If you are improving, you're usually enjoying it. You're having fun. You're seeing progress. And so improvement is central. A second component that's important is, of course, we want you to achieve your goals, those races. If you do want to become world champion or qualify for the Boston Marathon or whatever it might be, we want you to achieve that, because that's a source of great satisfaction. That makes us have fun, enjoy, have pride, and that's great. But that isn't the end. That to me is not success. That's the simple things. Real success comes when you are embracing your journey and you are achieving these things where you improve and you nail your goals. Along the way, as another component comes out, and that's that you become more healthy. You actually have a platform of health, because ultimately, whatever we love to do, we want to do it for a long time, longevity. And making this big life even bigger is really important. So we want you to improve your health. And that's an essential part of the success as we think about it. We want to help you be able to show up in life and in work and be a better leader or employee or mother or father or whatever it might be. And that's important. And that comes out of the journey, not necessarily the goal, but the journey. And that becomes really important. And ultimately, by taking it all in, and when you look back in a year's time or 2 years' time, you realize, hang on, I've become a better version of myself. I've improved. I'm happier. And I think that's really cool. And so while that all sounds quite utopian, this is success. And this is what you should be thinking about as you go through it. Fantastic. What it diffuses is pass-fail. Every day, am I good? Am I bad? Am I good enough? Am I failing? When you start to think about success in these terms, it diffuses the harsh black and white world that so many athletes and so many of us get drawn into. Good, bad, pass, fail. We want to dismantle that framework because it's not healthy. And when you think about, I'm going on a journey, I'm looking to improve, I'm going to meet adversity, I'm going to have obstacles, I'm going to have bad days and failures, but as long as I can build this journey, ultimately, I'm going to be successful. And by the end of this presentation, I hope that you can hold hands with me and really embrace this. So for me, this is success. And I hope that you're engaged and in line with me on that. The big message, embrace the journey. Great. That's all lovely and perhaps helpful in framing the lens that we look at things. But now we need to outline very simply, just in a couple of slides, how we get there. And I think that this is a critical element. Let's first talk about what not to do. Because when we diffuse or remove what you shouldn't do, we can start to take action on how you should approach your training. And this is through the lens of a time-starved athlete. Here are our current world champions in triathlon. Lucy Charles on the right, Gustav Iden from Norway on the left. You do not want to emulate these people. These people are at the pointy end of the spear where everything in their life is built around physical performance. Everything. The rest of life is suppressed, and it's appropriate because for a very short chapter of their life, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, their absolute focus is reaching world-class performance. And so one of the big mistakes that is understandable why coaches do it, understandable why athletes do it, is to try and emulate what these people are doing. But the truth is that these people are playing a different game under actually conditions that are advantageous to them, because they don't have all of those other commitments that we talk about in life. At least those other commitments are suppressed in priority. And so I want you to avoid, and I thought, how can I say this when you can remember it? What I don't want you to do when you go about your training is shrink it and pink it. Now, if you're in the fashion industry, you know what I mean there, because this is how they used to do women's fashion. Take guys' fashion, shrink it down, pink it. That will do. That's what great cycling jerseys or bikes are like. We don't want to shrink it and pink it. Instead, what you want to do is review how these pros go about it and draw out the appropriate lessons. Because elite athletes can give us great lessons, and we should learn from them. We should understand training methodology. We should understand how they go about high quality nutrition, fueling, and everything else, and we can learn from them. But then the absolute critical stress is draw out the pieces of that are appropriate and applicable to you and apply it into your recipe and your life. And so there are things that we can draw from them, but we must almost translate them and utilize them in an appropriate way. So what does that look like? Well, let's think about your recipe. Let's think about what the program is. Because if you're a triathlete, the program typically means how many hours a week do you swim, bike, and run? And how many hours a week do you then swim, bike, and run? And how many hours a week then do you swim, bike, and run? And if you're a marathon runner, it's the same thing. If you're an open water swimmer, it's the same thing. If you're a gravel bike racer, it's the same thing. How many miles, how many kilometers, how many hours? Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. For me, that isn't the recipe. That's not the program. It's broader than that. And so what we have consistently at the world-class level, what we can draw from the professional athletes and is absolutely applicable to you is a very simple fact, which is to be successful, you need to find a recipe in which you can integrate endurance training. And it's specific endurance training that fits within the fabric of your life. Pretty simple concept. If you want to get better at triathlon, you better swim, bike, and run enough. But that's not the end of the conversation. Because in addition to that, You then, from that hard work, because let's be clear, there's no easy way. It takes commitment. You must consistently train. But we want to ensure that that training is effective. And so balanced with that, you need to allow your body enough time to recuperate and to adapt. This is the stress, the endurance training, and then you allow time for recovery and adaptations, and that includes sleep. And so those two things work together. We add to that then a backbone of really high quality nutrition. Now, I don't mean that you need to turn into a monk, but there are some really important and basic and easily applicable habits around fueling, around post-workout fueling, around hydration and daily hydration of the day, and just good quality nutrition in daily life, which will help with recovery, ensure that you get enough adaptations, the appropriate adaptations, you avoid injury, and you manage energy. So now we start to have the building blocks of the program. But there's one more, and that's the big umbrella of strength. Being really stable, being able to retain posture, ensure that you can retain good form and good technique when fatigue comes in, making sure that you amplify and can yield all of the gains from the endurance training. Strength is a performance enhancer. Every endurance athlete should integrate strength, period, and everything that comes with it: core, stability, mobility. And it's those four things that make up the program. The only way for you to be successful, the only way in the long term, over the course of your journey, you might be able to get away with it for one event, but the only way that you can create longevity, create performance predictability, is to think about your program in these terms. And that's why, from an educational basis, we always talk about at Purple Patch the 4 pillars of performance. Now, driving those is, as you have underneath in this diagram, the performance mindset, which what we mean by that is your decision making, your perspective, and we're going to come into that in a couple of seconds. But ultimately, when you think about your program, your recipe for you to get ready for whatever your goals are, these 4 tenets or pillars have equal weight. They have to have equal weight. And it's so hard, and it takes bravery. But if I hear an elite athlete say to me, I only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, I know that they're not serious about their performance. And if I'm working with a CEO that proudly says, I only work 4 or 5 hours, sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, I know that they're not serious about their performance. The point is that you have to think about all of these elements, and you have to find a way to bring them all into your psyche on a day-to-day basis so that they can become habitual, so that you can maximize the performance yields. And I don't believe, particularly in a time-starved life, there's any other way to do it. And so that brings up a point. And that point is that you should pick your peers, pick your coaches, pick your programs wisely. Because unfortunately, there's quite a lot of bad out there. And if you're following a program out of a magazine, or you're just following along with an online program and it's only anchored in one of these tenets, the chances of your success are limited. And I don't mean that in any way to bash really well-meaning coaches out there. That's not the spirit of this. But let me put it a different way. Just because you exercise doesn't mean you're healthy. It's very simple. Because if you exercise every day, but you don't sleep more than 3 hours a night, functionally you're not healthy. And equally, just because you sleep every night for 9 hours doesn't mean you're a high-performing individual. It could actually mean that you're just lazy. And so it's only when you start to have a more holistic view on programming and you start to think about these as your building blocks of success, where it is your recipe, that you are enabled to yield the fruits of your absolutely required hard work. And that comes out of the training that you do. Well, Great. If you buy into that and you say, fantastic, pillars of performance, I've heard you talk about it before, Matt, I'm buying in. The question is, how do you do it? How do you actually apply? How do you integrate that into my life where you can be successful? Well, let me try and give you a little bit of success. And I think before we dive into season planning and events and a couple of mistakes that I want you to avoid and a little bit of perspective on how you might build a season, which hopefully will be a catalyst for a few questions, let's pause and think about the most successful people. When we think about athletes that are most successful, well, it goes without saying they have this overall holistic view. They understand and they embrace the journey. They don't think about things as pass fail, and they have a long-term view on the journey. But almost every time, there are these building blocks that are put into place. And I think these are important. So as you start going out this year, and most people listening probably have very lofty goals. They want to achieve a lot. They certainly want to improve. And goodness me, I want you to absolutely achieve and be successful. These are some things that you want to put into place. Number one, you want to ensure that you have a really good structure of accountability. Now, that can go more than one way. When you say accountability, people always think about, at least I do, the headmaster or the principal at school holding you to account, coach with his moustache and his whistle. You are going to get it done and you're going to show up. But it's not the military here. Accountability can come in various forms. It can come in partnership. It could become in you actually being accountable to showing up to help someone else. And so having a sense of accountability, great example is being a member of a master swim program. Great. Whereas your lane mates start to show up. Are you coming on Wednesday? Great. Tuesday was really tough. Are you coming the next day? I'll be here. Sense of accountability. Your riding group or your track session that you go to, a sense of accountability. It's important. But you will be more successful if you have on a day-to-day basis a sense of accountability, and it can come in many different forms. And oftentimes that accountability can come from you being the leader. It's not just always looking up. Sometimes it's bringing people up. And there are lots of great examples of athletes building accountability when they are the leader. Runner Shalane Flanagan is a great example. Sarah Piampiano, a purple patch professional athlete, helped a lot of junior athletes, bringing them up. She had accountability to them. Her habits and behaviors improved because she wanted to be a leader. Accountability can come in many great forms. So that's one building block. And if you don't have it right now, and then the chances of your success at less. Coupled with that, community. This is a really important component. Now, the Purple Patch podcast last week and then this week, coming out tomorrow, we had a discussion with Brad Stulberg, and we talk a lot about this. I recommend that you go and listen to the interviews that I did with Brad Stulberg. He's a great author around 3 performance books, the latest, The Practice of Groundedness. It's very, very good reading. But we talked about community. And in fact, even though you are likely pursuing a relatively individual sport, time and time again, we see that athletes are much more successful if they feel like they have a sense of belonging, being a part of something. That helps drive mission, and it helps with that accountability, but it also helps with you enjoying the journey. And if you embrace the journey and realize that this is something that is going to take time. It's not a quick fix, because there is no quick fix, and that's the truth. Being a part of something and having a sense of belonging is really good. And that's a part of the reason that when I'm coaching an athlete, if they say, hey, can I join a master swim program? I might ask them to do 1 or 2 specific swims, but typically I really encourage them to embed into a program, because I realize that the specificity of a single swim session is often trumped by the power of community and belonging. And so those 2 are your first 2 really important building blocks. The third is being coached. Now, I realize I sit here and I talk as the owner of a coaching business and myself a varying ground coach, but there is a reason that almost every elite athlete is coached. And there is a reason that almost every business leader is coached. It's because of perspective, of someone being able to help you course correct, to being able to help you guide the direction, and ultimately an expert that understands your situation, understands your challenges, and being able to partner on a journey. Coaching is really, really valuable. And it is possible to build your own program and do it all yourself. And I understand that people love to do that. And a part of that is sometimes finding the right partnership. It's also possible to build your own house. But quite often you get an expert to do it. And that's because of the wisdom and expertise to take you on the journey. Now, being coached isn't just having someone deliver all of the answers for you. The coach is only the person to empower you so that you can amplify your efforts and your journey. It's a true partnership. And so if you do choose to get coached, or you do choose to become a part of a program, you must bring your best self. You must lean in, and there's accountability for you showing up and providing feedback. It's not just magic fairy dust. And the fourth component is really important for you to continually have a long-term lens. Yes, I'm getting ready for X, Y, and Z, but I'm on this journey. And so I keep coming back to it, but I think it's really important. And if we build on top of that, 3 very simple things. Number 1, you've got to be patient. Another part of the conversation with Brad Stulberg, he has a wonderful saying, which is be patient to get there faster. And that's exactly the point. One of the biggest challenges, particularly when we establish big, hairy goals, is accelerating too quickly. And the chassis breaks down, you meet fatigue earlier, you have greater obstacles and obstructions. Patience is important. Embrace the journey, long-term lens. I know I sound like a broken record. The second component is you've got to be persistent. Grit. It's important. Commitment, showing up, keep doing it. There is a bit of grindstone to this. Ultimately, if you want to be successful, toughness is a part of it. Commitment is a part of it. Showing up is important. Persistence, it's really important. And finally, being able to consistently come up a level, pause, reflect on last week, yesterday, last month, look forward and see the vision ahead and understand your plan. Perspective is really important. But those 3 gold elements, the 3 P's, patience, persistence, and perspective, they come on top of the building blocks of success. When you've got a really good structure of community, accountability, hopefully some coaching and a long-term lens, those are the things that will accelerate. And so those are your building blocks as you go into performance. Super. Well, what's the secret? Your secret, as you want to go to the next level, is consistency. We've got all of the wonderful training in the world. We can say that we want to integrate our habits. But the absolute truth is that you want to create great consistency. But not just consistency, consistency of effective training. Effective training. What's effective training? Well, training is a stress, a specific stress that you place on the body. And from that stress, you want to yield positive adaptations. The body will always adapt to a stress. It's whether it adapts negatively, systemic suppression, tissues, muscles being pulled, ligaments being torn, that's a negative adaptation, or a positive, fitter, stronger, more powerful. And so we want to build a recipe that we talked about of really effective training and supporting habits, good sleep, good post-workout fueling, good hydration, etc. If there is a secret, that's the secret. Consistency. The key is, how do you get there? Well, if you ask the vast majority of athletes, how many hours a week does it take to get ready for an Ironman or a half Ironman? The typical answer that everyone will give is 20 hours a week. That's what it takes. And that's wonderful. Look, ultimately, I'm all in favour of doing 30-hour weeks. In fact, I'm in favour of doing 40 hours a week of training. In fact, I even like 50 hours a week of training. That will be wonderful if it's effective, if your body can positively adapt to it. But the problem is that by taking the program first and saying this is what it takes to be successful, you then have got to do something. And that's enmesh it with everything else in your life. And if we come back to our goals, and we talked about family and work and logistics and travel and vacations and all of the other stressors and things in life that are non-negotiable. You can't suddenly not work, at least most people can't. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to see you next year, family, but I really want to get ready for IRONMAN Arizona. You have to integrate this program into life. And if you're committing to quality sleep and good habits around nutrition, and you're going to do some strength and conditioning, that's an awful lot to get in. And what ends up happening when you think about your work and travel, and you think about your family and vacations, and you think about all of your social commitments and everything else that you have in your life, and then you try and think about time to decompress, allow this magical 20-hour program to marinate and absorb and provide adaptations. Now you're starting to suppress this, and you're accumulating so much stress that the body breaks, and you either leave with a continued cycle of injury or frustration, because you work your tail off, and then when it comes to game time, those big hairy goals that we started with tonight, you underperform and you're frustrated and you don't understand why your run off the bike wasn't good. It must be my nutrition. I must have to do more. I must have to run more. No, you are trying to cram too much training in relative to all of the other non-negotiable components of life that ultimately bring stress. And that's the key. So instead, if you want to create a program, that recipe that we talked about, and to be successful, and we agree that consistency of effective training is important, what you have is something different, which is you start from the other side. You have your work and travel, period. Okay, you can't change that. You've got commitments. You still need to thrive. I want you to think in mind, what's our success? Improved health, showing up in the workplace, showing up in life, having fun and creating longevity, becoming a better version of myself. Oh, and by the way, improving and actually reaching my goals. Well, let's think about those success when we think about work and travel. You've got to show up in those elements. And you want to be there for your family and friends and be present in any holidays or vacations. And you still want to have a social life. You've probably still got some commitments. Maybe you are coaching Jenny's baseball or softball team, whatever it might be. And then you must, as you agree with your 4 pillars of performance, you must embrace sleep and recovery. Otherwise, you're just following a line of performance stupidity. Then what you have is a certain capacity to then integrate into the program. And what happens when you do this successfully is not mythical balance, but you have an integrated approach where when life ebbs and flows, and maybe you're not working as much, or maybe the family away on a trip and you're home alone, your program can expand and you can do more. But at the same time, if work amplifies and you've got a deadline or something happens at the coffee shop that you're running, whatever it might be, you might have to do a little less, but you've got an integrated mindset. And really the truth is, what you've got as a time-starved athlete, you've got something very simple. You've got an optimization challenge. That's what taking performance to the next level is it's an optimization challenge for a time-starved athlete. Because you are not a professional athlete. You don't have 30, 40 hours a week to train. You have, at least most of the athletes that we meet, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 14 to 16 hours. And the point is that it's not that 20 hours of training is bad. It's not that 30 hours a week of training is bad. It's good if you have capacity. to absorb it and ensure that it's effective. But for the vast majority of amateur athletes out there, you don't have time. So instead, you got to think about optimization. All right. So I hope that you go home tonight and you think about that diagram in terms of our goals and integrating goals into life, and then on a weekly basis thinking about building the program into life, because this is something that's quite empowering. This can frame your decision making, and if you've got the tenets of the program that's made up of endurance training, strength, recovery, and of course simple habits and nutrition, and then you integrate it into life, your chances of success are greater. Let's just talk about event planning to finish off tonight. So when we think about events, let's get a little bit more granular. Let's talk about races. All of your races that you choose to do are important. They're all important, but it doesn't mean they're equal. You should have an A race. You should also have supporting races or B races. Now, that's not that they're not important, but they are stepping stones towards your ultimate goal, or goals if you've got a couple of A races over the course of the year that define the most important. And that's really typical. If you were doing, in our example for tonight, Ironman Arizona, you might choose to do a couple of half Ironmans along the way. And they're great opportunities to test your fueling, to get race experience, to build some race fitness, to go through that experience, to hopefully achieve and really get a lot of success and satisfaction in each of those races. You want to go out and race. But by definition, they're not the be-all and end-all. And equal to that, a really common mistake that I want you to avoid when you think about this year, and I can hear already on the other side of the screen people starting to scramble, is I want you to avoid over the course of this year, as you think about your season, what we call the once-a-month syndrome. Great, racing starts for me, it's going to start in April, and I've got Oceanside, and then in May I'm going to do St. George, and in June I'm going to go and do Eagleman, in July I'm going to go and do whatever it might be, a race in July, and then in August is my A race, and once a month you're racing. Now, it might fit quite nice. The problem is detraining. Because if you've got race week, which is not a great training week for overall athletic development, where you want to progress, and then you actually go and race, and then you've got a week of recovery, if you're racing once a month, 50% of your month is taken up with a week prior and a week following racing. And what ends up happening over the course of a season is people actually start to detrain. They might get very fit, but they're not actually retaining or progressing or really having an opportunity in this example to prime for the A event. In our example that we've just stumbled upon tonight, Ironman Arizona, they don't have a time to really put down and layer down some key sessions to build the necessary resilience. And so instead, I think, and there are a multitude of ways to go about it, but you want to be a little bit more strategic with your racing. And typically, as a global lens, any year of training that you do is really built around making sure that you have the first part of the year or the block of the year or the build towards an A race being less focused on getting race-specific ready. So if we are getting ready, Ironman Arizona is in November, just using our continued example for tonight. I'm not even thinking with an athlete right now, Ironman. All I'm thinking about is improving them athletically. So I'm building the chassis or the strength and the integrity of the muscles, tendons, and ligaments. I'm looking to improve them technically across the disciplines. I'm looking to improve the size of their capacity or their engine. And I'm looking to gradually build their power and speed. And I'm going to improve their athletic development. And then at the end of that, I am then going to point the ship towards race specificity. So you have, in broad terms, a program of athletic development and then specific race preparation. Now, along the way, as you think about athletic development, you can absolutely race. You can go and do an early season race. You can go and do a shorter build towards a cluster of races, maybe over the course, in our example here, of June, July time, that you go and do some great races. But then you take a recovery and you give yourself a block of time that you can actually prepare without the distraction of racing. And that's a really valuable way of actually thinking about race preparation, ensuring that you get athlete development into race preparation. So when we think about this at a more granular level, the way that we think about it at Purple Patch over the course of any year is phases of emphasis. Now, these all blend into each other, but as we find ourselves here, the vast majority of our athletes are in a phase that we call prepare, because we're preparing the body. That means that we're starting to build around a lot of technical development, a lot of power, a lot of speed, but we're not really too worried about endurance right now. There's a heightened emphasis on strength and conditioning, quite a lot of work that is going to build and prepare the system for some very hard work ahead. And over the course of the next 6 or 8 weeks or so, we're really getting an athlete building in fitness, but most importantly, building their overall capacity. And then what we want to do is get them faster. You could call this sharpen in many ways, but we actually build big central platforms of fitness. There's a lot of work at threshold and above threshold here, some faster, high power, more sustained work here. And this is where we see athletes get a lot fitter. And over the course of this phase, typically in the middle of the bell curve, April, May into June, there's a lot of early season races. There are some races that are sometimes very important to athletes, but we're still not overly worried about building overall endurance. It's coming, but it's coming incrementally. And then it is then that we build race specificity, particularly for long course athletes, getting ready for half Ironman distance. If you're a marathon runner, getting ready for marathon distance running. But before that, building the integrity of the muscle and tissue, technical development, then getting faster, and then getting ready for the demands of the event. And you finish your race, and you're really happy, and you're excited because it's gone well. But remember, the finish line is not the end of the journey, because it is then that you go into a critical element called postseason. And it's not very long, but it is the most important phase of the year, because that's a chance to achieve several things. Decompress, allow your body to restore, do some other fun stuff, but also start to prepare your body at a mechanical level to get ready for the very hard work ahead. A lot of technical development, a lot of strength and conditioning, building the chassis up, but not having a heavy emphasis on hard work. It's less focused, it's less time commitment, but it's the most critical predictor in athlete performance that we possibly have. And as you finish and you go out and you head towards the holidays this year, if you really want to be successful, you know what happens then? You do it again. Because you don't start from ground zero again. You don't finish a year and go, all right, back to square one, now let's do it again. What am I going to do this year? The next year of preparation builds on top of what you've done this year. And when you finish that year, then it builds on top of it again. And it continues on. And it builds on top of it again. And it builds on top of it again. And that is the secret. And that is the journey. And that is why we say it takes patience. You can be highly successful in your events this year. But by being successful in integrating sport into your life, embracing the longer term journey, making sure that we amplify and creating sustainable performance, you're not only going to have fun, you're not only going to enhance performance predictability, but you're going to find a recipe in which you're not burnt out, you're not continually injured, you're not continually tired. And that is what success is about. So I managed to do it in under an hour. If you are interested in more, we are going to follow up with you. We have a weekly educational newsletter which I think that if you're not a participant, we will add you. You can always opt out of that. It will be very helpful. I encourage you to listen to the podcast. It's all anchored around the broad subject of performance, both in terms of sport, life, and work, of course. And there's always the invitation. If you would like us to go on the journey with us, you can join us. You can reach out to us. And if you want to reach out to us, very simply, info@purplepatchfitness.com. You guys that are watching this presentation, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you. We can set up a quick conversation and see how we can help you, see if we can bring this to life. And as I mentioned, as a Tiger, I can bring you back in here for any questions that we might have. We are going to follow up after tonight's session with an important educational piece that I think will help you lay the groundwork to really get on and help this be applied. But Tiger, we've either got people that have fallen asleep by now, or maybe we have some questions.
We do have a couple of questions. We'll just start at the top here. Somebody said, I've got a job where I travel frequently, so it's hard to keep a consistent schedule of training. Do you have any additional recommendations for somebody trying to train around jet lag and inconsistent training environments while sticking to this methodology?
Yeah, that's sort of our our sweet spot. We're well versed at this. So I say a couple of things. In the same way as races are not equal, they're all important, but they're not equal. Training sessions are not equal as well. And one of the biggest complaints that I get when I talk to an athlete that is incoming is coaches that prescribe training sessions that don't fit the training schedule. So I'm heading from LA to New York, and I'm in New York and I'm being asked to do a 2-hour bike ride. It doesn't fit. The most important habit that you can get is one of the things I talked about is perspective. So you have your week of training, and what you want to identify is your key sessions of the week, the ones that are going to move the performance needle. And you try and structure those when you obviously have the best environment to do them. And then the rest of the training sessions, and typically it's only a couple of days a week that are really, really important. And so you do those sessions when you both have the best schedule to do them, the best environment, but also the best resources. And then the other sessions are more supportive. It doesn't mean that they're irrelevant or not important, but they're more supportive in nature. They're there for either technical development, general endurance, or a little bit of preparation for an upcoming key sessions. When you travel, typically for work, I'm assuming this is, it's more of a supportive lens that you go through. And when I work with executives, I tend to try and build it around the facilities that they have. And so a little bit of planning. Many hotels have some form of swimming access, or you might have local swimming access. But making sure that your hotel, more importantly than that, has really good access for a very simple gym. You don't need much, a treadmill, or of course trying to get it at locations that you can get outside, weather permitting. So if you were traveling to New York, making sure that your hotel is closer to either the West Side or Central Park, really basic things like that. And then in addition, you just got to hold perspective. So it takes some planning, but you can't, I think the biggest mistake is trying to cram in really hard intervals. So when I have athletes that travel a lot, I do things that will help energize them, build overall resilience, be quite soul-filling as we call it, but not take too much physiological energy from them because of the time zone travel. The other component, which is broader than what I can go into now, is some of the things that we can do with managing resources with hydration and nutrition that can really help offset a lot of the impact of jet lag and appropriate travel. But we have athletes that travel globally for consulting companies and are always gone and still successfully compete in half Ironman and Ironman athletes. And I think that a lot of the perspective that it starts with the lens that we talked about tonight, rather than this is the plan, I have to force it at all else. So it's a big subject, but that's my quick and dirty response.
No, that's awesome. And we have someone more here, but I want to just in the short time we have focus in on two related questions because they really speak to the time-starved element. And I'll read them both. The first is, so it says, I've got a crazy schedule with work and childcare that leaves me with 45 to 60 minutes during the weekdays to train. Is it even worth it to still try and train for 70.3 with that schedule on the weekdays? And what's the best use of my time? And then the other question is from Kurt. Hey, Kurt, asking, can you speak to the benefits of shorter training sessions? I often feel like unless I train for at least an hour, I'm not really making progress.
It's a great question. So there is a certain level of, I want to make sure that I'm not being the Wizard of Oz. And so there's a sort of reality component to it. And if you can consistently carve out 45, but I would say 60 minutes in weekdays, there are plenty of athletes that really successfully get ready for half Ironman events with 60-minute sessions over the course of the week. The truth is that one of the things that you lose, if you think about, a lot of people think about base, building a foundation, more miles, etc., you're going to have a really strict optimization challenge with it. And what I mean by that is your program is going to have a higher ratio of high intensity training. Because if you don't have capacity, you better actually amplify intensity. So 3 or 4 of those sessions are going to have to be shorter and faster, high intensity, and there's a real recipe to that. But look, he had lungs the size of a rhinoceros or a bull, but we had an athlete that went under 9 hours at the Hawaii Ironman and never trained more than 10 hours a week. And so he was pretty time compressed at the Ironman scale, but he could do it. And his typical weekly training hours from Monday to Friday were 45 to 60 minutes max. But it was a lot of high intensity. That means that you cram your intensity in the week, 3 or 4 sessions, and then you build your resilience a little bit more on the weekend that maybe you've got 90 minutes or 2 hours. And you can absolutely get ready for a half Ironman on 7 to 8 hours a week. You absolutely can and be successful. But it also involves being pragmatic. And what you can't do is, it's the ultimate program of not emulating and trying to do everything that the pros do. Instead, you've got a different challenge. And so, in short, it's high intensity 3 to 4 times a week. Sometimes that's a 40-minute bike class. Is it optimal? No, but it's a 40-minute bike session with a 10-minute run-off. And that 10-minute run-off is fast, minute on minute off fast. And you build up capacity. 40 minutes, a quick ramping warm-up, and 30 minutes of hard work. Suddenly you've got a high-value session. So far as the second question, there is massive value in doing a whole bunch of really short stuff because it's just incremental. And in fact, I have a lot of our athletes doing what we call the run frequency project, where some of their runs are 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, but we're building them with other runs that are 30 to 40 minutes and an occasional run that's 50 to 70 minutes. But over the course of a week, they're building tissue resilience, neurological programming, and overall a swell of low intensity conditioning. And that can actually be a bit more of a tsunami build. So a subtle, slow build rather than a tidal wave build of fitness. And it's actually a really healthy component. And so, unlike what I just said to the question around I've only got 45 to 60 minutes in any day to train, going out and doing a 20-minute run, a 30-minute run, it has multiple value propositions, and they don't always need to be hard. In fact, many of the sessions can be really, really easy, but it's really good for the soul. It energizes, it builds tissue resilience, muscle ligaments and muscle ligaments and tendons. And that's actually going to improve your health, and it improves the dialogue of brain to muscle. If you want to learn guitar, don't do 3 hours once a week. Do 20 minutes every single day. You'll become better at guitar. And so I think that there is tremendous value that comes out of short. Don't always think that short isn't value. In the same way as that to become great at something, you don't have to have great training sessions every day. To be great at something, to become a great athlete, whatever your version of great is, you don't have to be great. You've got to be pretty good. And if you can string together pretty good training, day after day, week after week, where sometimes it's not so good, sometimes you have great days, but things are pretty good, and you accumulate that and you do things consistently, and sometimes you don't have time and it's 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes you have more time and it becomes a great session, you feel great. But overall, if you roll up and you build pretty good, what comes out of it is greatness. And that's a really important mindset.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that we are at time here, so we will go ahead and wrap things up. But if you do have any other questions, again, reach out to us, info@purplepatchfitness.com. If we didn't get to your question or something comes up later, we'll be happy to connect with you. And then check your email in the next couple of days here. You'll have some additional education from us and supporting items. And we'd love to get your feedback. And again, any other details on what you thought, take advantage of those. And I'll hand the mic back over to you, Matt, for closing thoughts here.
Yeah, firstly, just a couple of things in closing. Firstly, very best of luck this year. I hope it have a tremendous year, and I hope that you're inspired to embrace the journey and de-pressure some of your goals. The goals are great and we want to be successful, but if you can embrace the journey and have fun along the way, you're going to be successful. As Tiger said, we'd love your feedback. It's really, really helpful, and we'd love you to reach out and start a dialogue. What would you like us to educate about? What would you like us to talk? What are some subjects that are really important? Info@Purple Patch Fitness. It goes straight to Tiger and myself and the team, and we really are an open book. So if you have topics that you would like us to dive into, guests that you would like us to have on, feel free to reach out. And then look out for the education. It's further education that will be helpful. And I think at the end of this month, if you are engaged and you are excited about, maybe I want to become a part of the Purple Patch community, I know, Tiger, that you're doing an open house for people that are interested to find out more information on the website. We'll also make sure that we add that to the education. There's absolutely no pressure to join by joining that session, but if you'd like to find out more, I believe it's February 28th, similar time to what we had this, 5 p.m. Pacific, and you can have an open house. You can ask any question around coaching, the squad programs that we have. We now have squad programs for standalone strength, for running, led by Coach Michael Zinski, for triathlon, obviously led by myself, and of course bike squad. And so cyclists, triathletes, runners, lifestyle, strength and conditioning, we've now got it all. But for tonight, thank you very much, guys. Have a great time and really appreciate you spending time with us. Take care.
Thanks, guys.